Your Majesties, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for always returning. Trust you and yours are well, and you are loving yourself and others like always. Many thanks to all of you for the support you give to the channel. Thank you so much to our channel members, anonymous supporters, to all of you, my esteemed subscribers. You are all loved, celebrated, and appreciated. So, today I want to take your mind to this whole idea of the Catholic Church created Islam. It was said that a Jewish, an ex, no, not a Jewish, an ex-Jesuit priest exposed some of these things, and he said he was told, all right, that a cardinal told him some of the secrets, and it's there. I think it's a documentary, so it's something that you can easily find. All right. While the clip will play, you're going to hear how you get to this information. Now, of course, it will be something that the church will say it's not true. It's forces that want to destroy the church that are bringing things like this up. It's something that Catholics will come out to defend and say, no, you don't have to say this. You're trying to, you know, you're trying to tarnish the image of the church and the rest of them. This is it, Your Majesties. It's normal. But the truth is that, like how the story goes, you're going to hear yourself, right? Now, the truth is, Khadija herself, the widow that Muhammad married, was connected to the church. You're going to hear how as the clip progresses. And her sister as well, who had a very crucial role to play, also had a connection with the church. Now, it was even said that Khadija was an ex-nun. You're going to see how it all went down, right? So when you talk about the church, of course, it still went further to say that the reason why Islam was created was to get back Jerusalem for the church, because of course Jerusalem was seen as a holy place. So if Jerusalem was captured, and if the Roman church have control over Jerusalem, because at that time there was no other denomination. When you talk about Christianity, you talk about the Catholic Church, and that before then there were people who already had this way of life and they were living. You know, when you talk about Ethiopia and the Ethiopian Bible and other things connected to Ethiopia, there are lots of eye-opening, right? So, like I said, we had knowledge of spirituality, and there were people who were already living this life of solitude that already depicts that of Christianity. Now, what the church wanted was a power to control everybody. And if they were going to do that, if the whole Christendom will have to look at the church as a head, and then the person who is leading as the sole authority, it has to be Jerusalem, because of course that is a significant place. Now, when you talk about the church, we have the eastern and the western part. So the eastern parts do not agree that the present pope who is in Rome now is their pope. They have their own pope. He's not pope, he is not popular. You can do more research. You can even Google it. It's there. We have the eastern part of the church and we have the west, the western part of the church. A lot of things are similar, but they do not agree in terms of sovereignty. All right, they do not see the Pope as a head because they have their own leadership. They have their own Pope. We will listen to this. You will listen to this yourself, and I want you to listen keenly with an open mind, and you leave your comments and thought there at the section. We are not free. All right, we are not free because the enemy have been trying. The enemy have tried, and Your Majesties, a lot of things we believe in are just the creation of some people. This is a truth. A lot of things we believe in are the creation of some people. Whether we take it or leave it, this is for a fact.
Picture of the Pope kissing the Quran. The Catholic Catechism in our library out here, you can read it for yourself. Some of the things they believe are pretty interesting. They say in the Catholic Catechism, 841, the Church's relationship with the Muslims is the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, the first place among whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God. There's an excellent little bitty comic book called The Prophet you can get from our ministry. It's like $2 or something like that, by Jack Chick. He goes through the history of the Muslim church and how they started. Very few people realize it was the Catholics that started Islam. They started the whole religion purposely to try to get the Holy Land back for the Catholics. They built up the Islam, they funded Muhammad, they trained him, they sent a Catholic nun out of the monastery. They said, we want you to come out of your convent, go find a young promising Muslim, marry him, and train him to raise up an army of Arabs to go take back the Holy Land for the Mother Church. Quite an interesting story if you want to read about that. So let's cover just a little bit on Muslims. Ask the Muslim, how do you know Muhammad was a prophet? They'll say, well, he had a mole on his back. Holy moly. That's how you know he's a prophet, because he's got a mole on his back. I've got a mole on my back. Got one right here on my cheek. Man, I must be a double prophet. Got 2 moles. Albert, you got any moles? Yeah. Wow, bow down and worship Albert, you know.
The astonishing story from the ex-Jesuit priest, Alberto Rivera, how the Vatican created Islam, which was told to him by Cardinal B, while he was at the Vatican. After his conversion to Protestant Christianity, Alberto Rivera exposed what he was told by Cardinal B. And this story is excerpted from The Prophet, published by Chick Publications in California. Since its publication, after several unsuccessful attempts on his life, he died suddenly from food poisoning. But his story should not be silenced, as it is important to understand. Alberto Rivera went on to say, "What I'm going to tell you is what I learned in secret briefings in the Vatican when I was a Jesuit priest, under oath and induction. A Jesuit cardinal named Augustine B showed us how desperately the Roman Catholics wanted Jerusalem at the end of the 3rd century. Because of its religious history and its strategic location, the Holy City was considered a priceless treasure. A scheme had to be developed to make Jerusalem a Roman Catholic city. The great untapped source of manpower that could do this job was the children of Ishmael. The poor Arabs fell victim to one of the most clever plans ever devised by the powers of darkness. Early Christians went everywhere with the gospel, setting up small churches, but they met heavy opposition. Both the Jews and the Roman government persecuted the believers in Christ to stop their spread. But the Jews rebelled against Rome, and in 70 AD, Roman armies under General Titus smashed Jerusalem, and destroyed the great Jewish temple, which was the heart of Jewish worship. On this holy place, today where the temple once stood, the dome of the Rock Mosque stands as Islam's second most holy place. Sweeping changes were in the wind. Corruption, apathy, greed, cruelty, perversion and rebellion were eating at the Roman Empire, and it was ready to collapse. The persecution against Christians was useless as they continued to lay down their lives for the gospel of Christ. The only way Satan could stop this thrust was to create a counterfeit Christian religion to destroy the work of God. The solution was in Rome. Their religion had come from ancient Babylon, and all it needed was a facelift. This didn't happen overnight, but began in the writings of the early church fathers. It was through their writings that a new religion would take shape. The statue of Jupiter in Rome was eventually called Saint Peter, and the statue of Venus was changed to the Virgin Mary. The site chosen for its headquarters was on one of the 7 hills called Vaticanus, the place of the divining serpent where the satanic temple of Janus stood. The great counterfeit religion was Roman Catholicism, called Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, which we see in Revelation chapter 17 verse 5. She was raised up to block the gospel, slaughter the believers in Christ, establish religions, create wars and make the nations drunk with the wine of her fornication, as we will see. 3 major religions have one thing in common: each has a holy place where they look for guidance. Roman Catholicism looks to the Vatican as a holy city. The Jews look to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and the Muslims look to Mecca as their holy city. Each group believes that they receive certain types of blessings for the rest of their lives for visiting their holy place. In the beginning, Arab visitors would bring gifts to the house of God, and the keepers of the Kaaba were gracious to all who came. Some brought their idols and, not wanting to offend these people, their idols were placed inside the sanctuary. It is said that the Jews looked upon the Kaaba as an outlying tabernacle of the Lord with veneration until it became polluted with idols. In a tribal contention over a well, called Zamzam, the treasure of the Kaaba, and the offerings that pilgrims had given, were dumped down the well and it was filled with sand. It disappeared. Many years later Odab al-Muttalib was given visions telling him where to find the well and its treasure. He became the hero of Mecca, and he was destined to become the grandfather of Muhammad.
Muhammad asked the question, when I am dead and buried in the ground and go back to dust, is that all? What will happen to me? Muhammad himself had no clue if he was going to heaven. One of the books we sell in our bookstore, and I don't get off into every single religion there is, but Islam is a growing, powerful religion, and you need to study it, is this little booklet, Who is this Allah? On page 27, he says, the last hour will not come before the Muslims fight the Jews and the Muslims kill them. That's their plan. The purest joy in Islam is to kill and be killed for Allah. In the third surah, verse 105, it says, in the great and final redemption, only white faces shall be saved, all black faces will be condemned. In other words, you got to be white to go to heaven, to the Muslim heaven. Okay?
Before this time, Augustine became the Bishop of North Africa, and was effective in winning Arabs to Roman Catholicism, including whole tribes. It was among these Arab converts to Catholicism that the concept of looking for an Arab prophet developed. Muhammad's father died from illness and sons born to great Arab families in places like Mecca were sent into the desert to be suckled and weaned and spend some of their childhood with Bedouin tribes for training and to avoid the plagues in the cities. After his mother and grandfather also died, Muhammad was with his uncle when a Roman Catholic monk learned of his identity and said, "Take your brother's son back to his country and guard him against the Jews, for by God, if they see him and know of him that which I know, they will construe evil against him. Great things are in store for this brother's son of yours." The Roman Catholic monk had fanned the flames for future Jewish persecutions at the hands of the followers of Muhammad. The Vatican desperately wanted Jerusalem because of its religious significance, but was blocked by the Jews. Another problem was the true Christians in North Africa who preached the gospel. Roman Catholicism was growing in power, but would not tolerate opposition. Somehow the Vatican had to create a weapon to eliminate both the Jews and the true Christian believers who refused to accept Roman Catholicism. Looking to North Africa, they saw the multitudes of Arabs as a source of manpower to do their dirty work. Some Arabs had become Roman Catholic, and could be used in reporting information to leaders in Rome. Others were used in an underground spy network to carry out Rome's master plan to control the great multitudes of Arabs who rejected Catholicism. When St. Augustine appeared on the scene, he knew what was going on. His monasteries served as bases to seek out and destroy Bible manuscripts owned by the true Christians. The Vatican wanted to create a Messiah for the Arabs, someone they could raise up as a great leader, a man with charisma whom they could train, and eventually unite all the non-Catholic Arabs behind him, creating a mighty army that would ultimately capture Jerusalem for the Pope. In the Vatican briefing, Cardinal B. told us this story. A wealthy Arabian lady who was a faithful follower of the Pope played a tremendous part in this drama. She was a widow named Khadija. She gave her wealth to the church and retired to a convent, but was given an assignment. She was to find a brilliant young man who could be used by the Vatican to create a new religion, and become the Messiah for the children of Ishmael. Khadija had a cousin named Warqa, who was also a very faithful Roman Catholic, and the Vatican placed him in a critical role as Muhammad's advisor. He had tremendous influence on Muhammad. Teachers were sent to young Muhammad and he had intensive training. Muhammad studied the works of St. Augustine, which prepared him for his great calling. The Vatican had Catholic Arabs across North Africa spread the story of a great one, who was about to rise up among the people and be the chosen one of their God. While Muhammad was being prepared, he was told that his enemies were the Jews and that the only true Christians were Roman Catholic. He was taught that others calling themselves Christians were actually wicked impostors and should be destroyed. Many Muslims believe this. Muhammad began receiving divine revelations and his wife's Catholic cousin Warqa helped interpret them. From this came the Quran.
It started to work, but then it failed because Islam got so big, they said, well, forget you Catholics, we're doing what we want. And I don't think most Muslims, which is now, what, 10, 20% of the world population, Islam, I don't think most of them know that they really started off as a front for the Catholic Church.
Bye for now.